John?
Yes.
Jay?
Yes.
And we have a quorum. If you would please rise for the voluntary pledge of allegiance. I pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Alrighty. And the first order of business is approval of the minutes from July 6th.
So moved. Second.
It's been moved by Jay Stanton Greger, seconded by Bob Lynn, that we approve the minutes. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That passes unanimously. We now move on to amendment and approval of the meeting agenda. Is there a motion to approve?
So move.
Second.
It's been moved by Nancy Strand, seconded by John Haverlick, that we approve the meeting agenda. All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? All right, meeting agenda is approved. The next item on our agenda is public hearing on ordinance 2015-11, an ordinance of the Petersburg Borough adjusting the FY 2016 budget for known changes. Is there anyone that wants to speak to this issue? And hearing none, we'll move on. Oh, actually, we need a motion on that, don't we?
No, not for the public hearing
Okay.
part.
The next item is the authorization to award a purchase of an RAVO 5 Series street sweeper for the Public Works Department from Enviro Clean Equipment for an amount not to exceed $213,811. Is there anyone that wishes to speak to that issue? And hearing or seeing none,
This one we do
we
need.
do need a motion for the approval of this purchase.
So move.
Is there a second?
Second.
It's been moved by Nancy Strand and seconded by Jay Stanton Greger that we approve the purchase of a street sweeper in the amount of $213, not to exceed $213,811 for the Public Works Department. Is there any discussion? Go ahead, John.
I guess this is mostly for Carl. Carl, we don't have one presently, do we?
We do have a street sweeper.
And is it buns up or?
It's getting pretty close to it.
Yeah. You know, I was just worried about the upcoming years and spending any money. Is it something we have to get, or would life be okay if we didn't?
As long as we put sand on our streets in the wintertime for traction control, we should really have a sweeper available to us to pick that stuff up in the springtime. If we don't, we're just going to see dust on all of our streets, even paved streets. We can wash streets, but that just puts it into the storm drain system, which requires more maintenance to get out. So it really pays off for us to have a sweeper to pick that sand and dust off the street before we wash.
Okay, thank you.
Is there any other discussion? Yes, Jay.
Yeah, Carl, one more for you too is, I guess maybe for people at home also, why now? Why purchase this at this point?
It's part of the motor pools replacement program that we look at our equipment every so often, generally at the end of its life cycle. The sweeper that we have didn't quite make it to the end of its life cycle, but it's not doing all that well. We've had significant maintenance issues with it in the past as far as the engine goes. The corrosion is starting to take over the body, and the hydraulics are weakening to the point where the one we have now is a mechanical sweeper that actually brushes the debris into a conveyor belt and then dumps it into a hopper. That hopper has a belly dump mechanism to empty it, and the belly dump won't hold together, so we end up with a trail of sweepings following us all the way back to the yard every time. So we're kind of defeating the purpose of having a sweeper in the first place with the unit that we have right now. So I believe it's time to replace it so that we can move forward with a unit that does the job once. The unit that we're looking at purchasing also has some additional capabilities above what our current one does. Right now, our current sweeper will only sweep streets. This unit is a vacuum sweeper, so it has an additional capability of cleaning valve boxes and catch basins, actually sucking the dirt and debris out of those items. And it has a pressure washer on it that we can use to not only to clean the piece of equipment itself, but to pressure wash fire hydrants and other public improvements like trash cans. So it has more uses, or we'll be able to get more use out of this unit in the future above what we can out of our current sweeper.
So just to summarize what I'm hearing from you, from a function and cost perspective, you think this is the right purchase at this time?
I believe it is.
Thank you.
And Carl, I have one question for you. What's the anticipated life of the machine that you would like to purchase?
We're hoping to get 15 years out of it.
Okay. Any other discussion on this? If the clerk will call the roll.
Nancy?
Yes.
Bob?
Yes.
Cindy?
Yes.
Jay?
Yes.
John?
Sure.
All right, and that motion passes. Moving on to visitors' views related to the agenda. We don't have any visitors in the audience other than borough staff, if anybody wants to, and media. Does anybody have anything they want to discuss? And the same for visitors' views unrelated to the agenda. Is there anything anybody would like to bring forward? Moving on, we do not have any board, commission, or committee reports unless somebody would like to speak on an issue. There's nothing on the consent agenda, so we move on to the report of other officers. I feel like we're going at a galloping pace here. And Debbie Thompson is going to cover the 2015 municipal election report.
Okay, we will have our municipal election on Tuesday, October 6th of 2015. This year's ballot will provide for the election of 20 positions, 2 assembly members for 3-year terms, 3 school board members, 2 3-year terms, 1 1-year term, 4 hospital board members, 2 3-year terms, 1 2-year term, and 1 1-year term, 5 planning commissioners, 2 3-year terms, 1 2-year term, and 2 1-year terms, 2 library board members, 2 3-year terms, 2 harbor board members, 2 3-year terms, and 2 public safety board members, 1 3-year term and 1 1-year term. Those running for assembly, school board, and planning commission are required to fill out public official financial disclosure reporting documents, and I can help those that need direction in that. And to date, we have 1 proposition to be placed on the ballot, and that is the question of opting out of the candidate financial disclosure reporting. The first day to file for candidacy is Tuesday, July 28th. The last day to file for candidacy is August 25th by 5 p.m., and then we'll have the ballot all put together and send it right off to the printers. The last day to qualify and register to vote in the election is September 6th. And individuals can obtain voter registration forms here at the borough offices, and we will also send them in for people that would like us to. And I guess that's about it, really. Any questions?
And I know we've had conversations before as an assembly about the number of positions that we have on our ballot, and that may be something that the assembly wants to think about in the future. That's a lot of people to be putting on a ballot, and maybe that's not the best way to handle those positions.
It's a lot.
Yep. The next item on our agenda, thank you, Debbie,
You bet.
is the mayor's report. And we have the draft comprehensive plan and waterfront master plan out, and they can be viewed or downloaded by going to the borough's webpage at www.ci.petersburg.ak.us and clicking on the link. And the deadline for the draft plans has actually changed, I believe. I think we got something from Agnew Beck saying they would take comments until August 15th.
Correct.
And actually, they said they would take comments at any time, but it's more helpful to them if they have the bulk of their comments in early. Southeast Conference's annual meeting will be in Prince Rupert this year, and it's September 15th through the 17th. The conference theme is cross-border partnerships, and any assembly members that are interested in attending should get their registration in prior to September 1st. The Clerk Thompson has done an extensive look at the various ways that you can travel there, and Liz Cabrera has also already made her arrangements. So if you're planning on going, I would suggest talking to those folks for some. They've already done the heavy lifting. So we have a letter of interest to serve as a planning and zoning commissioner until the October 6th, 2015 election, and that was received from Otis Marsh. And if Mr. Marsh is appointed, the Planning and Zoning Commission will still have one vacancy. And do we do that at this time, or?
Yes, it can be done at this time. And I apologize, I forgot to put his letter in the packet.
Can we do it at this point in the agenda? Do we need to move on to another point?
Can do it right now.
Is there any? I guess we don't even need to make a motion. Is there any discussion about Mr. Marsh being on?
Just a question, if I may. Do we have a letter of recommendation from the chairman of P&Z or Liz by any chance?
I contacted Ms. Cabrera. They don't have a meeting until August. She would like this to move forward if possible. She was recommending it.
Okay.
How many years has Otis Marsh served on the Planning and Zoning Commission by now?
A long time, yes.
Yeah. Just
All right.
wanted to make sure.
Then we will reappoint Mr. Marsh to the Planning and Zoning Commission and thank him very much for stepping up. Yes. And as we said before, we still have one vacancy, so if there's anyone else out there that's interested. And then the next item on the report is Petersburg's Planning and Zoning Commission is seeking letters of interest for one vacant seat. Interested parties must be registered borough voters and must have resided in the borough for a period of 1 year prior to taking office. The appointee will serve until October 6th, 2015, and I assume that they would also be able to run for election at that
Yes.
time, too. And then the Petersburg's Historical Preservation Committee has a vacancy for an architect or an at-large member, and that appointee would serve until December 31st, 2015. Letters of interest may be addressed to the borough clerk and emailed to d.thompson@petersburgak.gov and mailed to P.O. Box 329, Petersburg, AK 99833, or you can drop them off at the Borough Administration Office in the Municipal Building. And moving on to the manager's report.
Thank you, ma'am. The North Harbor skiff float, the warranty work was completed by Western Dock and Bridge prior to the minus tides over the weekend. The fix did seem to take the extreme low tides well. We did have some damage due to those really low tides. The launch ramp float, when a random chunk of piling floated in and lodged itself under one of the float sections, punched through the billets and the deck covering boards. So our harbor staff was able to pull it free, patch the hole, and we're having Tamaco order some extra coverings in sheets as part of the new fish cleaning station piece, so that when this stuff happens, we can go in and fix it ourselves. We have an empty elderly housing apartment that is just waiting some new carpeting, and once that's done, we have a resident on the waiting list that will be moving in, bringing them back to full. Hariah Associates, our local engineering firm, will tentatively begin looking at the portico at the assisted living facility. We're having them do an inspection report on it. It's settled and we're seeing some damage. And then if everything goes well, we'll have them do the design with bid documents available in December. It's a much smaller project and fits within the budget up there. But we want to make sure we don't have other damage to that portico and cause damage to the rest of the building. The foundation slab is complete at the cemetery columbarium site. We'll let the concrete cure for about a month, and strengthen, and then we'll put when the columbarium units get here, and we'll get arranged for those to be installed. Public Works has been working on raising of the 2 foreclosed trailers on Lumber Street. The structures will hopefully be fully removed from the sites end of the week, beginning of following week. It's a bigger project and kind of messy. Carl's been working with the owner of the land on, some expectations and whether if they want us to do some extra work for them while we're there to kind of make sure that area is stabilized. And we've notified the owner on what the expectations are as far as building permits and bringing anything else in there so that the spacing is going to meet fire codes. So we'll see how that goes. Carl's Group, lots of water deliveries, although hopefully the latest rain will help some of that, to residents beyond the distribution system this year. A lot of dry times, and thanks to Public Works and folks who've been helping keep people having water in their homes. Recycling carts are being shipped this month. Republic Services has agreed to ship the carts in empty recycling containers headed back to Petersburg. This saved us about $5,000 in shipping costs. The recycling truck is scheduled for delivery in November this year. So, sanitation staff will be visiting the commercial recycling customers in August to evaluate future cart-based recycling service delivery and make sure that we can work with how they want to do it. Seacon and Sater Construction has most of the sidewalk, curb, and gutter completed on the north side of Haugen, and will be falling back to work on the south side this week. Rockham Road will be starting the force main installation on South Nordic on July 27th. Yes, sir.
Just an update on that. That's been pushed back now to August 3rd.
Wow, thank you. Thank you, Carl. The final switchover from temporary to permanent electric service was accomplished at the hatchery last week. Power had been provided on a temporary basis since the fire. We were able to get that finished and hooked up. Line crew and mechanic completed a big cleanup at the old pole yard on 14th Avenue. All of the surplus transformers, transformer oil, used antifreeze, and scrap metal have been removed from that facility. Power Line is also going to be looking at the pen stock around the Blind Slough Hydro and cleaning out that right away beginning July 20th. Over the years, we've had a lot of regrowth and some leaning trees in that area that we'll clean out and make sure they don't affect the hydro operation up there. The library launched their new catalog on June 16th. Has been well received by the public. Staff continues to work through some of the behind-the-scenes issues that need to be resolved. This again opened up the library's collection to a statewide consortium that allows people to get books from all over, which is helpful. The Summer Reading Challenge ends July 23rd. Participants have read nearly 1,500 hours since the program started June 1st. A pool party celebration is planned for July 29th to celebrate those who complete the program. Thanks to Parks and Rec for their help with that aspect of the program, and to the library and all of the folks who participated in helping folks do a lot of reading this summer. Liz Cabrera on Community Development has been fielding some ongoing discussions with various folks interested in purchasing property here in the borough, both from outside our area and inside. Issues include previous subdivision design issues, setback requirements, and property access. All of these areas we have identified as issues to address when the appropriate ordinances are rewritten. A lot of questions. How do I get to my lot if I buy it? What can I build and how can I build it, and questions like that. So stuff we're trying to work through. We have a travel writer visiting July 20 through the 23rd. It's a visit as a result of cooperative marketing effort between PEDC and Wrangell. And he'll be doing some fishing and wandering around, and hopefully we'll get a good article out of it. Cold storage has begun blast freezing salmon for Ocean Beauty. This is a general good sign for the cold storage is when Ocean Beauty is using this, we get much closer to breaking even in that facility. Congratulations to Path to Prosperity Business Plan Competition semifinalists from Petersburg. Petersburg Indian Association and the Saltery Pantry and Deli are semifinalists in that program. We have our pre-audit began last week and this week, and the final audit will be the week of August 3rd, where auditors will be in town and Jody's staff will be pretty much buried. We are planning to ask the lead auditor to make an appearance at the first assembly meeting in August, and they'll be able to address any questions the assembly may have at that time. And we are getting ready for the new credit card software at the Baylor and here at City Hall. We'll be training on that next week. This is to take into account some of the new requirements on basically identity theft and new types of cards with embedded chips, and making sure all of our software can handle that we've upgraded to. And that's it, unless there's questions.
All right, thank you very much. Moving on to unfinished business.
And
Yes.
a couple questions for
Yes,
Steve.
go ahead.
On the, three actually. On the portico, we have had trouble with that ever since it was built, and wasn't it just rebuilt a couple of years ago because it was sinking and cracking? And
Well, at least what I can find, and I'll maybe defer to Carl. There was a settlement with the contractor.
right.
Money was given, and although that money was not used to repair or replace that portico at the time. This was 5-6 years ago. So unfortunately, I don't know who made that decision. So it's been in that shape for a while and
Okay.
getting progressively worse.
So it was never fixed?
Correct.
Okay. The other thing is on the trailers. I imagine I saw some of the pictures. God, what a mess. But who's paying for that?
We are. The borough owns the trailers. They were foreclosed upon,
Right.
and therefore they are our problem to clean up.
But doesn't the landlord share any responsibility? He's been collecting, or she's been collecting rent on it for decades.
It's a great question.
It just seems we shouldn't have to pay for their mess.
The landlord does not own the trailers.
Right.
They lease space. It's one of the things that I've asked Liz and Joe, Joe B. is our code enforcement officer. We're having some meetings with the owner of the property and kind of moving forward in the line that there is a certain amount of responsibility for the owner to make sure his tenants are not using the property as a dump ground. We're hoping that will have some positive effects down the road. But I can tell you, it's you saw the pictures. It's a mess.
So this has to be costing several thousand to clean up, no? Yeah.
Probably. I mean, it becomes a question of we've got to get the trailers out of there, and I think we hauled off impounded 3 vehicles, 2 vehicles, Kelly? 3?
Yeah.
That were abandoned there. Each of the vehicles was also full of stuff.
Sure, yeah.
And this becomes a really difficult problem because as you said, the landlord, the owner of the property, has been collecting rents or some version of rents in these areas. We weren't collecting taxes. We end up foreclosing, and then it is our problem to clean up to make it right. We're not going to collect. We're not going to get repaid back for that money. There's no question. We're hoping the other residents take it as a good example of how nice those properties could look if people didn't use it as basically a landfill.
I guess we may not have any legal recourse, but it just doesn't seem fair that the borough should have to bear the cost of cleaning up another person's property when they've made money on it for decades. And it seems like if we don't go after them, we're setting a precedent that it's okay for you to whatever, and we'll pay to clean it up.
I seriously question whether the owner has been collecting space rent, for as many years as they haven't been paying taxes on them. How many years do they have to be remiss in their tax payment before we foreclose?
Well, we start the process a year after they've been a year late, but this was for taxes owed in 2012, I believe.
So I have a feeling they haven't been paying any space rent at least 212, 213, 214, 215.
Yeah, I don't know.
And I don't want to, this is obviously definitely an issue for the assembly to make long-term. I've done, in past lives, done major cleanups in neighborhoods like this. You get to this point, who is going to do it? And John is correct that we can put pressure on the property owner, and just like we could on a normal, stick-built house. The question is, when it doesn't happen and it basically becomes abandoned property, who ends up having the responsibility to clean it up? Mm-hmm. If the borough doesn't do it, it won't get done.
Right.
And therefore you have a neighborhood that property values fall. We're not collecting as much taxes because of the junk and the debris in the neighborhood. And not that we will collect enough increased property taxes to make up for Carl's costs in cleaning it up, but it's also a quality of life issue for the folks who do care about their property, who live up there and are trying to make their property look good. And as we do more of this down the road, we're going to have a little better plan on what's the steps. It's one of the reasons we approached the assembly about that revised nuisance ordinance that you folks passed. Gives us a little more authority and power than what we had prior to, as far as trying to address some of these issues. We've asked Joe B. and Liz to actively patrol that area, and we've reached out to the owner of the facility and said, you know what, we're going to expect a little more from you as far as maintaining and keeping an eye on the property. I'm not going to say that all of that will solve this problem. We won't having this conversation again someday, but
is there anything salvageable there, and is there any hazardous waste there?
Nothing salvageable. All metal. Plus there's some legal issues about salvaging that our attorney warned us about, said don't.
So it's not like we can recoup any costs that
No. We'll sanitation might recoup some of the cost of the metal next time we sell, metal, but nowhere near as much as what it's going to cost us to do. The hazardous stuff, we're being very careful. At least one of the properties was directly implicated in some illegal activity, and we found some obviously interesting letters, notes, and materials. And so Carl's folks are being very, very careful as they go through that process to make sure we don't get anybody hurt and we do the right thing, working with Kelly and his team as needed be.
Did you have a question, Jay?
Yeah, just a point of clarification for Jody. These types of foreclosures, if I remember you correctly, are markedly uncommon, yes?
Yes. In the last 10 years, there's been one other for a trailer.
Excellent, thanks.
Yeah.
John?
And then the last question I have is for Carl. With the recycle bins coming, will the recycling program, it's changing from the bags to the bins, but as far as collection of recyclables, will there be any changes coming around and that you're going to notify us about?
Absolutely. The program will be changing. The lengthy discussion that we had earlier in the year, all the points that we're making at the time, will be noticed to the public. The program will be well advertised before it's implemented. We're not looking at implementation till the truck gets here, which is November. So it may not even be till December that we actually do the change. There's plenty of time. We'll get that information out to everyone.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else? All right. Thank you very much. The next item on our agenda is an ordinance for second reading under unfinished business. And, oops, I just did something very interesting. There we go. This is ordinance 2015-11, an ordinance of the Petersburg Borough adjusting the FY 2016 budget for known changes. The ordinance has been amended since its first reading as follows. adding an additional $80,000 from the wastewater department reserves toward the Haugen Drive sewer upgrade project due to the condition of our wastewater infrastructure, adding $3,550 to the water department budget for the purchase of a backup computer for the water wastewater SCADA system, and $6,500 to the water department budget to replace failing valve boxes that were found during the Nordic and Haugen Drive repaving project. Do I have a motion?
So move.
Second.
It's been moved by John Haverlick, seconded by Nancy Strand, that we approve this, these changes to the budget. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, will the clerk call the roll?
Cindy,
Yes.
Jay,
Yes.
John,
Yes.
Bob,
Yes.
Nancy.
Yes.
And that ordinance is approved in its second reading. Moving on to new business, ordinance 2015-12, an ordinance placing the question of exemption from AS 39.50, Public Official Financial Disclosure Law, on the October 6, 2015 municipal ballot. And this is the participation by municipalities states a municipality may exempt its officers from the Public Official Financial Disclosure Law requirements by a majority vote during a regular or special municipality-wide election. The Assembly wishes to place this question on the October 6th ballot because it has resulted in some Petersburg residents' unwillingness to run for a seat on the Assembly, School Board, or Planning and Zoning Commission. The purpose of the Public Official Financial Disclosure Law is to prevent an individual from using a public position for financial gain. Assembly members are expected to recuse themselves from any vote in which they may have a financial interest, and our borough charter does not allow a public official to hold a paid borough position during their elected tenure and for a year afterward, and outlines a recall procedure for citizens to use as needed. So I need a motion on this ordinance.
So move.
Second.
It's been moved by Bob Lind, seconded by Nancy Strand, that we approve ordinance 2015-12. Is there any discussion?
Yeah, I would just like to add, I'll vote in the positive for this one for a number of reasons. Is that I really do not believe that after we've filled out all the paperwork and so forth, that this really meets the needs, our needs here in the community. It's when you first fill this out, it's pretty, what would I say, it's daunting, so to speak, when you first fill it out. And if you were a new person coming on board, please you'll have to see Debbie, at least on this election, because it is daunting and you need to follow those procedures. I feel strongly that we have at least 4 or 5 different procedures in place that really meets the needs of this. And even if at the point the public decides that we can opt out of it, it still allows the public to go forward if they feel that some official in this borough is inappropriately using their funds or their position to gain funds to file an appeal or to file a suit or to at least ask the questions or to ask APOC to look into it. So I don't really think, and the other procedures, I think Cindy mentioned a couple of them, but any one of us can recuse ourselves. Anybody can go for a recall procedure on any official here. And this also goes to both the school board and to all planning and zoning. So it covers a wide variety of people for this type of thing. And with that, I'll leave it go.
Okay. Yes, John?
Yeah, I agree with Bob, and would like to add that I feel it's keeping, because of the difficulty of going through the process, and people just, some really like their privacy. Mm-hmm. So it's keeping very, very high quality people away from getting involved in the assembly and some of these other committees that we would really benefit to have their involvement and their expertise and their knowledge. And I'll be voting for this too, just because I'd like to see those people involved.
Any further discussion? Hearing none, will the clerk call the roll?
Bob,
Yes.
Nancy,
Yes.
John,
Yes.
Jay,
Yes.
Cindy.
Yes. And that passes unanimously. Moving on to 15-238, authorization to send a letter of comment to ADOT and public facilities regarding the proposed fall, winter, spring 2015-2016 Alaska Marine Highway System schedule. And that comment period, I believe, ends today, doesn't it?
Yes.
And I would encourage anyone from the public who wishes to comment to look at that schedule on the ferry site and weigh in. And the clerk has drafted a letter for the assembly. And would you like me to read the letter? It's just in general asking the ferry system, voicing support for the ferry system and expressing the sentiment that that's our highway and we pay every time we get on our highway, and it's integral to how we operate in Southeast Alaska. So do we have a motion to send
So
a
moved.
letter?
Second.
It's been moved by John Haverlick, seconded by J. Stanton Greger, that we send a letter to the DOT on the ferry system schedule for fall, winter, and spring of this year and next year. Is there any discussion?
I would just echo what you said about members of the public writing letters for themselves. It is our highway. Please advocate for it. We need it. Can't say it strongly enough. Please do.
And the only thing I would add is I started to research, and actually if you just search for ferry system studies on the web, you'll find a number of them. The Department of Labor did one. I believe UAF did one a few years ago. All of them identify that ferry ridership is primarily Alaska residents, that in the summertime there are more visitors in Southeast Alaska, but year-round it really serves the Alaska residents more, and that it is an essential system. And I would consider it the same as our essential air service, that it's what we need to move equipment and people and commerce, and I certainly would advocate for it.
Yep.
Any other discussion?
Right, just to go on to what you're saying, I know with Dave who runs Chelan and many other small and large businesses here, it's going to not only severely increase their cost with the suggested new system, but may end up doing away with a number of businesses that are struggling, that without a decent system in place can't survive, which is going to hurt all of Southeast Alaska, especially Petersburg.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yes.
When I looked at it, and I spent quite a bit of time looking at the schedule, and you look at the services to Petersburg, I think they could be improved, but if you look at us compared to Sitka, and you look at us compared to Haines, Skagway, and some of the others, Sitka is really significantly down. I mean, I think they have one in, one out a week or two. I know there's no more than 2 a week. And then one of my concerns was, and the reason I talked about the ridership, is when you look at Haines and Skagway and the number of ferry between Juneau and those communities versus those coming on south or going on, that's my concern. And I've been on there quite a number of times coming between Haines and Juneau, and you look at the ridership there versus the ridership on south. The number of times I've been on, there's not more than 20 people on that ferry. Mm-hmm. And versus now we have almost daily service there. I think and if I remember the schedule. And that's the thing I think really needs to be looked at, is that as compared to the rest of Southeast.
And actually the UAF study talked about that a little bit.
And that's my concern that we were talking, I wanted to talk to in the letter. And that that's the part I wanted to be able to look at of the service to those communities there coming to Juneau versus those coming to the rest or servicing the rest of Southeast.
Well, and that's what we hear at the chamber is people will say, we can get to your community or we can get to Wrangell. We can't get between, or we can't easily get from your community to another place in a timely fashion. When you've got 2 ferries arriving in Petersburg on the same day and they're both headed north on the same day.
Yeah.
That doesn't make sense
Right.
for travelers or for businesses. So, I agree. I think there's some
Yeah.
efficiencies that can be had there.
Yes, and that's my concern, and that's what I was trying, when, in the letter, I'd like to see, that's what I was trying to reflect there,
Okay.
yes.
All right. Can you call the roll?
Nancy,
Yes.
John,
Yes.
Bob,
Yes,
Jay,
Yes.
Cindy.
Yes. And that passes. We will send a letter to ADOT. The next item on the agenda is communications. Does anyone have any communications to report? And moving on, we have assembly discussion items. Are there any recognitions that folks want to make? I would just like to recognize again the folks that organized the paddle battle to raise money for the tub room at the hospital. As it's been pointed out to me, that's for long-term care folks, that's their home. And that facility has needed some work for a long, long time. And there were a lot of participants this year. I didn't paddle because I couldn't get my kayak down to the water, but there were quite a few folks that came floating by my house, and they did a good job of having a community potluck down at Sandy Beach, and I think it was a worthy thing to be involved in, and I commend them for continuing that. Is there any other recognitions? Usually you guys have a couple things that you bring up. I'm surprised. All right. Our next item on the agenda is adjourning.
So moved.
Second.
All right. Meeting is concluded.